me ask you something. Do any of these scenarios sound familiar to you? Increased heart rate before public speaking, a tight knot in your stomach when you're making an important business decision, or sweaty palms right before calling someone on the phone. We've all been there. And do you ever wonder, how do people do it? How do I watch people do it and they make it seem so effortless? There's a trick to it, and I'm going to share that with you today. The secret is reframing, because you see there's two types of fear. There's protective fear, which is what alerts you to potential threats in the vicinity and potential harm to your physical well-being. And then there's harmless fear, which is everything else. And I'm going to show you how you can nearly extinguish all of that harmless fear for good with psychology. So how do we actually extinguish or minimize this fear? The secret is reframing it as excitement. Researchers call this reappraisal. And it's not about erasing the fear entirely. It's about choosing a different story for it that matches the same body signals that you sense. I want you to think back to a time when you were truly excited about something and really recall those feelings that you had experienced. It was probably an increase of adrenaline. It was probably more frequent and shorter breaths. And it was probably a tight knot feeling in your stomach. And what we need to realize is that these same symptoms are the ones that occur when we're feeling the so-called harmless fear. The only difference is the label we give it. And what we need to realize is that these labels that we assign to these feelings are what results in our perspective regarding them. So for example, fear tells us this is dangerous. Excitement tells us this is opportunity. And so a lot of those times of fear that you're feeling when you're about to go public speaking, when you're maybe going to ask somebody out, maybe when you're going to call somebody on the phone, maybe when you're in a meeting and you're going to contribute and speak up and share some ideas, maybe those are just your body feeling an excitement to have new opportunities. So instead of telling yourself you're nervous, just slow down, take a deep breath, and tell yourself out loud, I'm excited. Because if your life is not at risk, if you're not on the brink of death, then most likely you are excited for what's coming next. Now it's really funny because a few years ago, I went to Japan for the first time. I landed at night, I got off the airport, and then I went to take the metro system that they have there, the fast train. And I had no idea how to get to my hotel. My internet was not working. I just knew the name of the hotel and the stop that I had to get off at. And I looked at this big, confusing Japanese subway map that has all these loops and twists and turns, and I wasn't making heads or tails out of it. And then my last resort was to ask somebody for directions, and I don't know Japanese. So I motioned to the nearest person. It was a little old lady, and I just asked her in English, can you tell me how to get to this train stop? And she grabs a hold of my arm. She drags me over to the map, which they have near the door of the train. And she calmly and lovingly points out all the routes, all the stops I need to get off, all of the transfers I need to do. And this whole time you just see a big beaming smile on her face. And it really changed my perspective because I thought I'm being a burden to somebody. I'm gonna bother somebody's day. I'm gonna ruin the flow of their day. But in reality, she was just so delighted to be given that opportunity to help a stranger. And that really changes the way we think, because when you're in a meeting and you're about to contribute and you're feeling that nervousness, you're just actually anticipating the excitement that you have to share your perspective and potentially the excitement others have to hear your perspective as well. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all feel those same feelings and we all relate to each other. We've all been lost in a country somewhere, or we can at least empathize with that feeling. We've all contributed at a meeting before, or we can all empathize with that feeling at least. And that shared empathy is what we need to realize in order to conquer this fear. What you're feeling is something that most likely the other person has gone through as well. So why would you be scared? Now, what this technique does is trick your brain into aligning those physical, adrenaline-filled sensations with a positive outlook. If you're nervous for a speech, just think, I'm excited to share my ideas. If you're nervous before an interview, I'm excited to meet new people, for instance. Now, how can we remember this trick to get back into this frame, into this mindset when the fear starts creeping in? One suggestion I have is to think back to a time when you were truly excited, Perhaps you were going to go to a concert from your favorite artist, or even you were going to get on a roller coaster, and just let your body flood with those feelings that you felt at that time. Really recall those feelings and realize that those feelings are the same as what you're feeling now, and there's no difference. It's just a label. It's just a name we call those feelings. And you can really apply this to anything that has to do with this harmless fear. Because remember, protective fear is your body telling you, I am at risk of physical harm, get me out of here. Harmless fear is everything else. There's really no risk of you being harmed when you're gonna give a presentation to somebody. You see, a lot of fear boils down to uncertainty. It's a fear of the unknown. And that is really just an artifact left over from the hunter-gatherer days when uncertainty was actually the difference between life and death. We're not living those times anymore, so I think it's time we can finally conquer this harmless fear, and that'll enable us to really do so much more with our lives. Your body isn't broken, it's just confused. It thinks you're running from a lion when you're actually about to just go talk to your boss. Nowadays, I think we can ask ourselves, why do we automatically associate uncertainty with bad things? Uncertainty at worst should be considered neutral, because uncertainty can lead to actually really good results that are way better than you had ever anticipated. They can also lead to bad things as well. However, I think those average out, and we should just think of uncertainty as either neutral or potentially beneficial. For example, when I was on that train in Japan and I was asking that little old lady for directions, what were the downsides? What were the risks? Risk number one, maybe she doesn't speak English and she motions to me that she can't be of help. Risk number two, she just walks away. Now, what were the upsides? Upside one, I have a place to sleep for the night and I can get to where I need to go. And I potentially help somebody, I brighten their day by having them help me, and they get that sense of fulfillment as well. So the next time you're feeling that uncertainty, that fear of the unknown, I highly encourage you to think of it in a positive light, and that there's a risk of something really good happening. When we think of risk of bad things happening, we usually just blow it out of proportion. And if you're a realistic person like I am, in my mind, they average out, and it's just a neutral thing that I can make no judgment calls on it beforehand. So what's the point of automatically assuming that something bad will happen? Now you may ask yourself, if I don't feel fear, how can I have courage? Because courage is acting in the face of fear. So how does that work? Well, let me ask you this. Isn't reframing this fear as excitement a form of courage? Isn't it courageous to assume in your mind beforehand that the outcome will be a positive one, or at worst a neutral one? I think it is. Because fear doesn't need to always be fought. Sometimes it just needs a new label. That's the Sideways method. Turn what blocks you into what fuels you. This is Sideways Upward, and I'll see you in the next video.